watching Cramersez.
And the long-delayed news conference. Let's watch.
We just concluded this year's NATO summit, and the consensus among the members was it was a great success. It was especially momentous because it represented the 75th year of the most important military defense alliance in the world's history of the world. We should never forget that NATO grew out of the wreckage of World War II, the most destructive war in history. The idea was to create an alliance of free and democratic nations that would commit themselves to a compact of collective defense. Standing together, they knew we'd all be safer. An attack on one would be treated as an attack on all. And it's worked because a would-be aggressor knows if they attack one of us, they'll be attacked by all of us. Sending that message is the best way to deter aggression and prevent wars in the first place. For those who thought NATO's time had passed, they got a rude awakening when Putin invaded Ukraine. Some of the oldest and deepest fears in Europe roared back to life because once again, a murderous madman was on the march. But this time, no one cowered in appeasement, especially the United States. We collected intelligence that Russia was planning to invade Ukraine months before the invasion. I directed the intelligence community to be a significant amount of intelligence be declassified so I could start building an international coalition to oppose the invasion. Then in February, some of you remember, I warned the world that the invasion was imminent. I rallied a coalition of 50 nations from Europe to Asia to help Ukraine defend itself. Many foreign policy experts thought as Putin amassed Russian forces just 100 miles north of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, but Putin thought it was the mother home of Russia. The capital would fall in less than a week. But the Ukrainian people, backed by a coalition to help build, stopped them. Today, Kyiv still stands, and NATO stands stronger than it has ever been. During the week of this summit, several heads of states made it a point in their statements to thank the United States and to thank me personally for all that NATO has achieved. NATO is not only stronger, NATO is bigger because we led the charge to bring in Finland and Sweden into the alliance. And it makes a gigantic difference. Excuse me. Meanwhile, my predecessor has made it clear he has no commitment to NATO. He's made it clear that he would feel no obligation to honor Article 5. He's already told Putin, and I quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." In fact, the day after Putin invaded Ukraine, here's what he said. It was genius. It was wonderful. Some of you forgot that, but that's exactly what he said. But I made it clear, a strong NATO is essential to American security. And I believe the obligation of Article 5 is sacred. And I would remind all Americans, Article 5 is invoked only once in NATO's long history, and that was to defend America after 9/11. I made it clear that I will not bow down to Putin. I will not walk away from Ukraine. I will keep NATO strong. That's exactly what we did and exactly what we'll continue to do. Now, the future of American policy is up to the American people. This is much more than a political question. It's more than that. It's a national security issue. Don't reduce this to the usual testament that people talk about, issues of being a political campaign. It's far too important. It's about the world we live in for decades to come. Every American must ask herself or himself, is the world safer with NATO? Are you safer? Is your family safer? I believe the American people know the answer to all those questions is yes. And I believe the American people understand that America is stronger because of our alliances. I believe the American consensus from Truman to Reagan to me still holds today. America cannot retreat from the world. We must lead the world. We're an indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright wrote. Now let me turn to three other key issues. Just this morning, we had a great economic report showing inflation is down. Overall prices fell last month. Core inflation is the lowest it's been in 3 years. Prices are falling for cars, appliances, and airfares. Grocery prices have fallen since the start of the year. We're going to keep working to take down corporate greed to bring those prices down further. Meanwhile, Trump's calling for a 10% tariff on everything Americans buy, including food from overseas, vegetables, and other necessities. And economists tell us that would cost the average American working family another $2,500 a year. It's a tax of $2,500 a year. Second, our efforts to secure the border, southern border, is working. After Trump killed the bipartisan effort to secure the border, Republicans and Democrats had worked on, because he thought it would benefit me and make him a loser, Republicans walked away. So I took executive action last month. As a consequence, working with Mexico, border encounters have gone down over 50%. The current level is lower today than when Trump left office. Third, for months, the United States has been working to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, to bring the hostages home, to create a path for peace and stability in the Middle East. 6 weeks ago, I laid out a detailed plan in writing. It was endorsed by the UN Security Council, the G7. That framework is now agreed on by both Israel and Hamas. So I sent my team to the region to hammer out the details. These are difficult, complex issues. There's still gaps to close. We're making progress. The trend is positive. And I'm determined to get this deal done and bring an end to this war, which should end now. Let me conclude where I began. We're the United States of America. We are the indispensable nation. Our leadership matters. Our partnerships matter. This moment matters. We must rise to meet it. With that, I'll take your questions. I've been given a list of people to call on here. Reuters, Jeff Mason.
Mr. President, your political future has hung over the NATO summit a little bit this week. Speaker Pelosi made a point of suggesting that your decision on whether to stay in the race was still open. George Clooney and a handful of lawmakers have called on you to step aside. Reuters is reporting tonight that UAW leadership is concerned about your ability to win.
UAW just endorsed me, but go ahead.
Thank you. My question for you is, how are you incorporating these developments into your decision to stay? And separately, what concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one, the fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again. Secondly, the idea, I served in the Senate a long time. The idea that senators and congressmen running for office worry about the ticket is not unusual. And I might add, there are at least 5 presidents running or incumbent presidents who had lower numbers than I have now, later in the campaign. So there's a long way to go in this campaign. And so I'm just going to keep moving. And because, look, I got more work to do. We've got more work to finish. There's so much, we made so much progress. Think about it. Think about where we are economically relative to the rest of the world. Name me a world leader who wouldn't want to trade places with our economy. We've created over 800,000 manufacturing jobs, 1.5 million jobs. I mean, so things are moving. We got more to go. Working class people still need help. Corporate greed is still at large. Their prices, the corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic. They're coming down, and so I'm optimistic about where things are going. Danny Kemp, AFP.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you about your, you mixed up Presidents Zelensky and Putin earlier today. And you now have sort of your key allies, including the British Prime Minister, the President of France, and the German Chancellor having to step in and make excuses for you on that. And officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing by leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, here, I mean, Putin. I said, oh, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names. Look, guys, the idea anybody suggests that we haven't had an incredibly successful conference. How many times did you hear in that conference, I know it sounds too self-serving, but other leaders, heads of state, in thanking me, saying the reason we're together is because of Biden, because Biden did the following. Look, folks, this is, well, anyway, I thought it was the most successful conference I've attended in a long time, and find me a world leader who didn't think it was. Next one, Nancy Cordes, CBS.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned other instances in history where presidents have faced a challenge, but what makes this moment in history so unique is that it is not your enemies who are calling on you to reconsider your decision to stay in the race. It's your friends, supporters, people who think you've done a great job over the past 4 years. Have you spent time thinking about what it would mean for your legacy, which you've worked decades to build, if you stay in the race, despite the concerns that voters say they have, and you lose to someone who you yourself have argued is unfit to return to the Oval Office?
Well, look, I'm not in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I started. As you recall, understandably, many of you and many economists thought my initial initiatives that I put forward, can't do that, it's going to cause inflation, things are going to skyrocket, the debt's going to go up. What are you hearing now from mainstream economists? 16 economic Nobel laureates said I've done a hell of a job. That under my plan so far and what's going to happen in the future if I'm reelected, that things are going to get much better. Our economy is growing. I was determined when I got elected to stop the trickle-down economic theory, that if the wealthy did very well, everybody else would do well. My dad was a well-read, decent guy. I don't remember much trickling down on his kitchen table. Middle-class people and working-class people need help. And so what happened is I decided to was able to implement as president what I believed when I was a senator. And that is that the way to build this economy is from the middle out and the bottom up. That way we grow the economy. And the wealthy still do very well. They do fine. And guess what? Find me an economist, a mainstream economist who said we haven't done well. What have we not done that isn't working right now? And so we got more to do, though. We got to finish the job. And by the way, I come from the corporate state of the world. Delaware has more corporations registered in Delaware than every other state in the nation combined. I'm not anti-corporate, but corporate profits have doubled since the pandemic, doubled. It's time things get back in order a little bit. It's time, for example, if I'm reelected, we're going to make sure that rents are kept at 5% increase, corporate rents for apartments and the like and homes are limited to 5%. We're going to make a lot of changes that I've been talking about because we're going to continue to grow this economy. And by the way, remember how I got so roundly criticized for being so pro-union, not labor, union, union. Well, guess what? I've been the most pro-union labor president in history. Not a joke. And guess what? We had the Treasury Department do a study. When unions do better, everybody does better. Everybody does better. And we talk about how, for example, remember when we talked about getting the computer chip industry back in the United States? Used to be 40% of the industry. We invented the chip. 40% of the industry was in the United States. And former presidents decided that the best way to do it is find the cheapest labor in the world, send the product over there, and import what the product was. And so what did I do? I was told not to go over to Europe, to Asia, including Europe, but Asia. And I remember going to South Korea, convincing them to invest $20 billion in the United States to build computer chip factories. And I asked why when they finally decided to do it. And the answer was because you have the safest economy in the world and you have the best workers in the world. So the whole idea here is we've invested, there's over $50 billion in investment in computer chip manufacturing just coming in the bean. None of you thought that would happen. None of you thought that would happen. But it's happening. It's happening. And it's going to grow economies all through. And by the way, red states and blue states. Matter of fact, there's as much in red states as in blue states. I've made no distinction. So my generic point is that the idea that we can't continue to build and grow the economy, make it fairer. And like I said, from my standpoint, when the middle class does well, that's when the whole economy grows. The poor have a shot, the wealthy do well, but the wealthy got to start paying their taxes.
As a follow-up, sir, you mentioned that your Vice President Kamala Harris would be ready to serve on day one. Can you elaborate on that? What is it about her attributes and her accomplishments over the last 4 years that make her ready to serve on day one if necessary?
First of all, the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies. Secondly, her ability to handle almost any issue on the board. This was a hell of a prosecutor. She was a first-rate person, and in the Senate, she was really good. I wouldn't have picked her unless I thought she was qualified to be president. From the very beginning, I made no bones about that. She is qualified to be president. That's why I picked her. Felicia Schwartz, Financial Times.
Thank you, Mr. President. Presidency is the most straining job in the world, and it's 24/7. How can you say you'll be up for that next year, in 2 years, in 4 years, given the limits you've acknowledged that you have today?
The limits I've acknowledged I have?
There's been reporting that you've acknowledged that you need to go to bed earlier and your evening around 8.
That's not true. Look, what I said was, instead of my every day starting at 7 and going to bed at midnight, it'd be smarter for me to pace myself a little more. And I said, for example, the 8, 7, 6 stuff, instead of starting a fundraiser at 9 o'clock, start at 8 o'clock. People get to go home by 10 o'clock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and if you looked at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign, in the debate, I mean, my schedule has been full bore. I've done, where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball? I mean, look, he's done virtually nothing. And I have, I don't know how many, don't hold me to it, roughly 20 major events. Some of them with thousands of people showing up. And so I just think it's better. I always have an inclination, whether I was playing sports or doing politics, just to keep going, not stop. I just got to just pace myself a little more. Pace myself. And the next debate, I'm not going to be traveling into 15 time zones a week before. Anyway, that's what it was about. That's what it was about. And by the way, even with that, I love my staff, but they add things all the time. At the very end, I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway, I'm sorry, Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two questions for you. First, on the NATO summit, President Zelensky, in your meeting with him, he pressed you to lift your limitations on the Ukrainian use of American weapons, saying that, in his public remarks afterwards, saying that Ukraine cannot win the war unless those limitations are lifted. Are you reconsidering your position on that? And then secondly, following up on Felicia's question there, leaders of your own party have said that they're not worried about that debate. They're worried about the next bad night and the bad night after that. How can you reassure the American people that you are up to the task and that there won't be more bad nights at a debate stage or somewhere else?
First thing about Zelensky asking for the ability to strike deep into Russia. We've allowed Zelensky to use American weapons in the near term, in the near or abroad, into Russia. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not. If he had the capacity to strike Moscow, strike the Kremlin, would that make sense? It wouldn't. The question is, what's the best use of the weaponry he has, the weaponry we're getting to him? I've gotten a more long-range capacity, as well as defensive capacity. And so our military is where I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people. And we're making a day-to-day basis on what they should and shouldn't go, how far they should go in. That's a logical thing to do. Second question related to
Bad nights, sir. How can you reassure the American people that you won't have more bad nights, whether they be on a debate stage or it's a matter of foreign policy?
Well, I tell you what, the best way to assure them is the way I assure myself. And that is, am I getting the job done? Am I getting the job done? Can you name me somebody who's gotten more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? I created 2,000 jobs just last week. So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But there's no indication of that yet. None. Who I got here? Merrick, Pulaski Radio.
Thank you, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm well.
The elections in the US have consequences around the world. You have pretty high standing in Europe. I just asked President Macron about you, and he said we are happy to have him as the President of the United States. But there is a concern. Many people in Poland and across Europe are worried that the former president may win the election. And there's a lot of concern that Donald Trump may weaken NATO, stop supporting Ukraine, or push Ukraine to give up territories to Russia.
They're correct.
And yourself was warning just 2 minutes ago about it. So my question is, do you think that Europe will be left on its own if Donald Trump wins the election? And what's your advice to European leaders to prepare for possible US disengagement?
Well, look, I think, how can I say this without sounding too self-serving? I'm not having any of my European allies come up to me and say, Joe, don't run. What I hear them say is, you've got to win. You can't let this guy come forward. It'd be a disaster. It'd be a disaster. I mean, I think he said in one of his rallies, don't hold me to this, recently, where NATO, I just learned about NATO or something to that effect. Foreign policy has never been his strong point. And he seems to have an affinity to people who are authoritarian. That worries, as I tell you from Poland, that worries Europe. That worries Poland. And nobody, including the people of Poland, think that if he wins in Ukraine, he's going to stop in Ukraine, that that's going to be the end of it. And so what I can say is, I think I'm the best qualified person to do the job, to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, that Ukraine succeeds, that the European alliance stays strong. You may recall, no one was talking about Finland joining NATO. I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva, and he was talking about what we should do. We couldn't be in Eastern Europe, etc. And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine, because you're going to get the NATOization of Finland. And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. That's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me? Because in my office, I invited him to the Oval Office. We sat down and talked. He said he wanted to join NATO. Could I help? And I did. It wasn't automatic. And then I got a call from the Swedes. I beg your pardon? And so Finland joined NATO. 800-mile border is a significant, and they were already allies, but they weren't part of NATO. And you heard, I think you heard, maybe I can't recall whether he said it publicly in our closed meeting, but he wouldn't mind being repeated. He said, we decided in Finland, the people of Finland decided they had to be part of NATO. It was in our interest because of the joint ability to be together, to dissuade any attack on Finland. And the same thing with Sweden. It took a lot of selling to some folks, particularly in Turkey and other places, to agree to the expansion. But it expanded. And we're a hell of a lot stronger because of it. We're more secure because of it. And by the way, I was able to get 50 other nations, 50, to support Ukraine. 50. And we were able to bring about a coalition of Europe and Asia, Japan and South Korea. I just we talked about AUKUS, and we talked about the relationship between Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, the United States. We're making the world safer and stronger because we have to deal with the new arrangement that exists in the world. The Cold War is over. The post-war era is over.
Introducing Tusk. With Tusk, you get uncensored news and secure browsing.
I have a pretty good idea what that should be. I've convinced a lot of people to follow it, and we're just going to get stronger. David Sanger. Where's it?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Be nice, David.
Mr. President, the NATO declaration that was issued yesterday was very notable because it described China as a decisive enabler of the war in Ukraine for its provision of critical goods to the Russians. That's part of a broader partnership that seems to have cemented in place in the past 2 or 3 years. I think one that you were a little bit doubtful of when we asked you about it some time ago. So I'd be interested to know whether you have a strategy now of trying to interrupt the partnership between China and Russia, and whether or not in a second term you would pursue that, if you could describe that strategy to us. And along the way, could you also tell us whether you think, just to follow up on Felicia's question, that if you were in a room with Vladimir Putin again, the way you were 3 years ago, or with President Xi, that a few years from now you will be able to go negotiate with them, handle them one-on-one?
Well, the first part of the question is, we discussed and I raised in the NATO summit, and others raised, the future of China's involvement, what they're going to do. What they're doing with Russia in terms of accommodating, facilitating, they're getting access to additional, they're not supplying weapons themselves, they're supplying mechanisms for them to be able to get weapons. And China's position is basically, and I've spent more time with Xi Jinping than any world leader has, over 90 hours since being vice president all the way through, for real. And by the way, I handed all my notes. But my point is that Xi believes that China is a large enough market that they can entice any country, including European countries, to invest there in return for commitments from Europe to do A, B, C, or D, or not to do certain things. What's happened is we had a long discussion about what we have to make clear. China has to understand that if they are supplying Russia with information and capacity, along with working with North Korea and others to help Russia in armament, that they're not going to benefit economically as a consequence of that by getting the kind of investment they're looking for. And so, for example, we're in a situation where, and we've reestablished direct contact with China after that, remember the balloon, quote unquote, going down, and all of a sudden things came to an end? Well, we set up a new mechanism. There's a direct line between Xi and me, and our military has direct access to one another, and they contact one another when we have problems. The issue is that we have to make sure that Xi understands there's a price to pay for undercutting both the Pacific Basin as well as Europe, and as it relates to Russia and dealing with Ukraine. And so for example, if you want to invest in China, as you know this area really well, want to invest in China, you have to have a 51% Chinese owner. You have to make sure that you do by their rules, and you don't have the authority, and you have to provide all access to all the data and information you have. There was a while there, as you recall, the last administration and other administrations, where the access to that market was enticing enough to get companies to come in because they had access to over 1 billion people in a market, not 1 billion, but a lot of people in the market. And so they were doing it. But that got curtailed when we started saying we're going to play by the same rules. For example, the idea they don't abide by the international rules related to subsidizing products by the government funding. So guess what? They're not going to be able to export their electric vehicles to the United States without a significant tariff. Others are doing the same thing around the world. But it is a concern. It is a concern that you have both China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, countries that are not necessarily coordinated in the past, looking to figure out how they can have impact.
Do you have a strategy to interrupt that impact?
Yes, I do, but I'm not prepared to talk about the detail of it in public. And I think you'll see that some of our European friends are going to be curtailing their investment in in China, as long as China continues to have this indirect help to Russia in terms of being able to help their economy as well as help them in, as a consequence of that, their ability to fight in Ukraine. The other thing that we talked a lot about is that, and I raised it, and I didn't hear any. I can't swear that everyone agreed because not everyone got to talk about it, but we need a new industrial policy in the West. For example, we talked about how both the EU as well as NATO has to be able to begin to build their own munition capacity, has to be able to generate their own capacity to provide for weapons and the ability to, it came as a surprise to some of us how we had fallen behind in the West in terms of the ability to construct new material, new weaponry, new everything from vehicles to weapon systems. And so one of the things that came out of this was we're going to be meeting again with a number of my colleagues, my European colleagues, is what do we do to increase the capacity of the West, particularly in Europe and Japan, to be able to generate the kind of ability to produce their own weapon systems. Not just for themselves, but to be able to generate that. It's the same, it's what Russia's trying to figure out, that they went to China and they didn't get the weapons, but then they went to North Korea. But we're going to be in a position where the West is going to become the industrial base for it to be able to the ability to have all the defensive weapons that we need. That was a discussion as well.
Mr. President, I'm not sure you answered on whether you would be ready to go deal with Putin and Xi 2 or 3 years from now.
I'm ready to deal with them now and 3 years from now. Look, like I said, I'm dealing with Xi right now and direct contact with him. I have no good reason to talk to Putin right now. There's not much that he is prepared to do in terms of accommodating any change in his behavior. And but there isn't any world leader I'm not prepared to deal with. But I understand the generic point is Putin ready to talk? I'm not ready to talk to Putin unless Putin's ready to change his behavior. And the idea, look, Putin's got a problem. First of all, in this war that he is supposedly have won, and by the way, I think, don't hold me to the exact number, but I think that Russia had 17.3% of Ukraine that they've conquered. Now it's 17.4. I mean, in terms of percentage of territory. They've not been very successful. They've caused horrible damage, loss of life, but they've also lost over 350,000 troops, military, killed or wounded. They have over 1 million people, particularly young people with technical capability, leaving Russia because they see no future there. They've got a problem. But what they do have control of is they are very good at controlling and running the public outcry that relates to how they use mechanisms to communicate with people. They lie like hell to the constituencies. They lie like hell about what's going on. And so the idea that we're going to be able to fundamentally change Russia in the near term is not likely. But one thing for certain, if we allow Russia to succeed in Ukraine, they're not stopping in Ukraine. I recommend, I know you know this because you've written about it, read Putin's speech after they moved in, what it was all about in Kyiv. It wasn't about just, anyway, read what his objective is. And anyway, but so I think that I'm prepared to talk to any leader who wants to talk, including if Putin called me and wanted to talk. Last time I talked to Putin was trying to get him to work on an arms control agreement related to nuclear weapons in space. That didn't go very far. So my point is, I'm prepared to talk to anybody, but I don't see any inclination. There is an inclination on the part of the Chinese to keep in contact with me because they're not sure where this all goes. And look what's happened in Asia. We have strengthened the Asian Pacific area more than anybody else has. We just put together with, today I brought on, I asked our NATO allies that we bring on the group from the South Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Australia. I already mentioned Australia. And I met twice now, I think, with the 14 leaders of the Pacific Island nations. And we've slowed down what's going on there. We've slowed down China's reach. But there's a lot of work to do. This is a moving target, and I don't take it lightly. Assam from NPR.
Thank you, Mr. President. Asma Khalid with NPR. I have two questions. Earlier, you spoke about the ceasefire plan between Israel and Hamas. We're now looking at 10 months of war, and I'm curious if there's anything that you feel personally you wish you would have done differently over the course of the war. And then secondly, if I may, I wanted to ask you about your presidential campaign. I remember covering your campaign in 2020, and there was a moment where you referred to yourself as a, quote, bridge candidacy, a transition to a younger generation of leaders. I want to understand what changed.
Two things. Let's go back to when you talked about would I have changed anything that's happening with Israel and the Palestinians and the Palestinian movement. The answer is, as you recall, from the very beginning, I went to Israel, but I also got immediate contact with al-Sisi in Egypt. I met with the King of Jordan. I met with most of the Arab leaders to try to get a consensus going as to what had to be done to deal with getting more aid and food and medicine into the Gaza Strip. And we pushed it really hard. And Israel occasionally was less than cooperative, number one. The Israeli War Cabinet, I've been dealing with Israel since Golda Meir. Some of the reporters around here come here all the time have heard me say this. The first time I met with Golda Meir, I sat across from her at her desk, and her assistant was Rabin sitting next to me. That's how far back I go. I know Israel well, and I support Israel. But this war cabinet is one of the most conservative war cabinets in the history of Israel. And there's no ultimate answer other than a two-state solution here. And so what was able to be done in terms of the plan I put together was it would be a process for a two-state solution. And we get the Arab nations to, particularly from Egypt all the way to Saudi Arabia, to be in a position where they would cooperate in the transition so that they could keep the peace in Gaza without Israeli forces staying in Gaza. The question has been from the beginning, what's the day after in Gaza? And the day after in Gaza has to be, the end of the day after has to be no occupation by Israel on the Gaza Strip, as well as the ability for us to get in and out as rapidly as you can, all that's needed there. I've been disappointed that some of the things that I've put forward have not succeeded as well, like the port we attached from Cyprus. I was hopeful that would be more successful. But that's why when I went to Israel immediately after the massacres that occurred at the hands of Hamas, the one thing I said to the Israelis, and I met with the War Cabinet and with Bibi, don't make the same mistake America made after bin Laden. There's no need to occupy anywhere. Go after the people who did the job. You may recall, I still get criticized for it, but I was totally opposed to the occupation and trying to unite Afghanistan. Once we got bin Laden, we should have moved on, because it was not no one's ever going to unite that country. I've been over every inch of that, not every inch, the entirety from the poppy fields all the way to the north. I said, don't make the same mistake we made. Don't think that's what you should be doing, is doubling down. We'll help you find the bad guys, Sinwar and company. And all this criticism about I wouldn't provide when the weapons they needed. I'm not providing them 2,000-pound bombs. They cannot be used in Gaza or any populated area without causing great human tragedy and damage. But remember what happened when you had the attack on Israel with rockets and ballistic missiles. I was able to unite the Arab nations as well as Europe, and nothing happened. Nothing got hurt. It sent an incredible lesson to what was going on from the Middle East. So there's a lot of things, in retrospect, I wish I had been able to convince the Israelis to do. But the bottom line is we have a chance now. It's time to end this war. Doesn't mean walk away from going after Sinwar and Hamas. And if you notice, you know better than most, there is a growing dissatisfaction on the West Bank from the Palestinians about Hamas. Hamas is not popular now. And so there's a lot of moving parts. I just have to keep moving to make sure that we get as much done as we can toward a ceasefire, and get those. And by the way, look at the numbers in Israel. I mean, my numbers are better in Israel than they are here. But then again, they're better than a lot of other people here too. But anyway.
Bridge candidacy in 2020. You referred to yourself as being a bridge candidate for a younger, fresher generation of Democratic leaders, and I wanted to know what changed.
What changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited in terms of the economy, our foreign policy, and domestic division. And I think, I won't put words in anybody's mouth, most presidential historians give me credit for having accomplished more than most any president since Johnson and maybe before that to get major pieces of legislation passed. And what I realized was my long time in the Senate had equipped me to have the wisdom to know how to deal with the Congress to get things done. We got more major legislation passed that no one thought would happen. And I want to finish it, to get that finished. If tomorrow, if we had a circumstance where there was a lineup and I hadn't inherited what I did and we just moved things along, anyway, it's going to change.
Last question.
Haley Bull, Scripps. Or no, Josh Weingrove, I'm sorry, was the next one. I'll do 2 more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Many of your colleagues, Democrats on the Hill, are watching tonight as they assess what they want to say about your candidacy. I'm wondering how you're thinking of this right now. It seems like your answer is clear, but they're watching how things go tonight, tomorrow in Michigan, next week in Texas and Nevada. Are you thinking that way about how the next week or 2 goes would inform your...
Am I using that way, you say?
Are you thinking that way about how the next 2 weeks go? Will that affect your decision, or are you fully determined on running in November as the party's nominee?
I'm determined on running, but I think it's important that I allay fears by let them see me out there. Let me see them out, for the longest time it was, Biden's not prepared to sit with us unscripted. Biden's not prepared to, anyway. And so what I'm doing is, and I've been doing, I think we've done over 20 major events from Wisconsin to North Carolina to demonstrate that I'm going out in the areas where we think we can win, where we can persuade people to move our way, or people are already there. And here, look, the other thing is, we have the most extensive campaign organization of anybody's had in a long, long time. We have well over 1,000 volunteers knocking on doors, making phone calls, making tens of thousands of phone calls. We have headquarters, I forget exactly how many, I want to cite a number and then find out I'm off, but we have scores of headquarters in all the toss-up states. We're organized, we're moving, and that's awful hard to replace in the near term. And here's the other thing. I was in the Senate a long time. Very proud of what I've done in the Senate. I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee for a long time, and I was chairman or ranking member and chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I'm going to be going down to the Johnson Library. Anyway, I'm going to be going around making the case of the things that I think we have to finish and how we can't afford to lose what we've done or backslide on civil rights, civil liberties, women's rights. There's that little button we have. Control guns, not girls. I mean, the idea we're sitting around, this is where Kamala's so good as well. We're sitting around, more children are killed by the bullet than any other cause of death. The United States of America. What the hell are we doing? What are we doing? We've got a candidate saying, promise the NRA, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. We've got a Supreme Court that is what you might call the most conservative court in American history. This is ridiculous. There's so much we can do still. And I'm determined to get it done. It's about freedom. And by the way, I'll end this. Well, I'm not going to do that. Haley has to come up too. But I remember I made a speech on democracy in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. And I'm not being critical, just observing. The bulk of the press said, what the hell is he talking about that for? Democracy. You did. Democracy is not an issue. Democracy is not an issue. Except the polling data showed 60% of the people knew I was right, thought I was right. I'm not asking you a question. You don't have to answer, obviously. But do you think our democracy is under siege based on this court? Do you think democracy is under siege based on Project 2025? Do you think he means what he says when he says he's going to do away with the civil service, eliminate the Department of Education, make sure? I mean, we've never been here before. And that's the other reason why you say, hand off to another generation. I've got to finish this job. I've got to finish this job because there's so much at stake.
We've had some discussions over the past few days with your press secretary about the question of health exams. And you said you take a cognitive test every day in this job. Are you open to taking another physical or test before the election? Governor Whitmer of Michigan, for instance, said it wouldn't hurt to take a test.
Well, look, two things. One, I've taken 3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist. In each case, as recently as February. And they say I'm in good shape, okay? Although I do have a little problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot. But I'm good. I'm tested every single day about my neurological capacity to do decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember when the staff and I said, I'm going to go to South Korea, we're going to get the chip. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand it. You know, the only thing age does is help you with it, creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention. And so the point I'm making is, I think it's important that if the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way, I've laid every bit of the record out, hadn't hidden a thing. You ought to ask Trump for his, okay? I laid it all out. And every single day I'm surrounded by good docs. If they think there's a problem, I promise you, or even if they don't think it's a problem, they think I should have a neurological exam again, I'll do it. But no one's suggesting that to me now. And I'll ask you another question. No matter what I did, no one's going to be satisfied. Did you have 7 docs? Did you have 2? Who'd you have? Did you do this? How many times did you? So I am not opposed if my doctors tell me I should have another neurological exam, I'll do it. But that's where I am. Haley Bull, Scripps.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said you're making decisions on a day-to-day basis when it comes to support for Ukraine. Does that mean you have not closed the door on further considering lifting restrictions for U.S.-made weapons inside Russia? And if I may, your convention is coming up where your delegates are pledged to make you the official nominee. If they have second thoughts, are they free to vote their conscience?
Obviously, they're free to do whatever they want, but I get overwhelming support. Overwhelming support I won, I forget how many votes I won in the primary. Overwhelming. And so tomorrow, if all of a sudden I show up at the convention, everybody says, we want somebody else, that's the democratic process. It's not going to happen.
Even if that means they vote for someone else?
Sure. Look, I'll end this with this. I served in the Senate a long time. I understand the impetus of candidates running for local office and whether they think the topic can help them or not. In my state of Delaware, which was a very, at least a purple, it was a red state when I started, in terms of where you now talk red and blue. I don't recall most of the Democratic presidents winning my state when I was a candidate. The truth of the matter is I understand the self-interest of a candidate. If they think that, running with Biden at the top is going to hurt them, then they're going to run away. I get it. But so far, go and look at the polling data in their states. Look at the in-depth, and by the way, I think you'd all acknowledge, and you're all experts, I'm not being solicitous about the president, you're experts on this stuff. How accurate does anybody think the polls are these days? I can give you a series of polls where you have likely voters, me versus Trump, where I win all the time. When the unlikely voters vote, he wins sometimes. The bottom line is all the polling data right now, which I think is premature because the campaign really hasn't even started. I mean, it hadn't started in earnest yet. Most of the time, it doesn't start till after September, after Labor Day. So a lot can happen. But I think I'm the best I believe I'm the best qualified to govern. And I think I'm the best qualified to win. But there are other people who could beat Trump too. But it's awful start from scratch. And, we talk about, money raised. We're not doing bad. We got about $220 million in the bank. We're doing well. So with that, you have any want to follow up on any of that you just asked me?
Yes. You earlier explained confidence in your vice president.
Yes.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that.
Mr. President,
okay.
This ends tonight's press conference. Thanks, everybody. This concludes.
Respectfully, earlier you misspoke in your opening answer. You referred to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. Right now, Donald Trump is using that to mock your age and your memory. How do you combat that criticism from tonight?
Listen to him.
This concludes tonight's press conference. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everyone.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
Global news with local views.
From the halls of Congress
Across the nation.
and around the globe.
You're getting the latest news and conservative views.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
Global news with local views.
Cramersez returns after this message from our partners. Learn how you can save up to 70% on your healthcare costs with just one click. Visit Cramersez.com/impact for complete details. That's Cramersez.com/impact.
What is Impact Health Sharing?
Impact Health Sharing isn't insurance.
It's a modern, affordable alternative to traditional health insurance, offering significant cost savings.
Most members save 30 to 50% on healthcare costs. With Impact Health Sharing, you enjoy the freedom to choose any doctor without in-network restrictions.
With an easy, hassle-free enrollment process.
Plus, access telemedicine 24/7 with $0 provider fees.
Call 844-827-2637 to learn how you can save 30, 40, even up to 50% on your healthcare costs.
The Cramersez Project is back.
With global news and local views.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
You're watching Cramersez.
Well, howdy. How did it go there? Let's see if we can get this up here. Got that. Let's do that, and let's turn that on. There we go. Get this right one of these days. Hey, how you doing, folks? Did that belay your fears about Joe Biden being president of the United States of America? Do you feel now, better knowing that he's 100% okay and ready for the campaign in November? Did that do it for you? What they labeled as the big boy press conference, a big boy press conference. That's what they called it right after his abysmal debate display. And what did he say today? Well, he said that Trump is the VP. Called Trump his VP. Right out of the gates. One of the first things that he said, Trump was his VP. He also said that inflation is under control and that we should all rally around him and all the work that he's done. As they take item after item out of that index of items they say that they're looking for inflation. Coffee's the latest one. No, I can't have coffee in there. Price of coffee shooting through the roof. We can't have that in there. Rambling, meandering, talking about what's going to happen in Russia and Ukraine. Says that he's not going to give Putin the satisfaction of a call. Why? They've got a war, an active war going on, and he doesn't feel the need to end that war. Why isn't his push like Trump's to end the war in Ukraine? Instead of the continued funding, why isn't ending the war and the dying? We keep hearing about how they need all of these armaments because their people are dying. Well, don't you want to stop that? Don't you want to stop the dying? The way that you stop that is you stop the war. They have no interest in doing that either. So that means going into another 4 years of continued, if Biden is elected, another 4 years at minimum of war. Minimum. Because there's too much money to be made. Then he said that the election hasn't even started yet. He's already had a debate that he lost abysmally, which is why he has to do a big boy press conference. And he's saying that the election hasn't even begun. Folks, it's already over. The polling confirms it. The state of the nation confirms it. The left is realizing that their plan is falling apart. Their house of cards that they built on lies over the last 7 years is all falling apart. The American people no longer believe them. When they go to the podiums and they say Trump is a racist or Trump is a misogynist or MAGA is this or MAGA is that, the American people aren't listening anymore. They're tired of the mean girl or the bully on the playground crying wolf. The sky is falling all the time. That's all they've done for the last 7 years. And their arbiter, their messenger, Joe Biden, is this feeble old man that somehow they can't seem to talk out of running. Folks, they've only got a couple of options available to them. The rules and the laws governing the elections in states around the country are specific, that there's certain dates, that certain things have to happen. And once you've passed that date, you can't put somebody else on the ballot except for two things. They've only got two options available, folks. Two. The first option is that Joe steps down. Well, they're not going to do that. They don't want to screw with his legacy. That's why they keep talking about legacy. The only other way they can get him is through the 25th, right? They don't want to do that either. They don't want to 25th him. They don't want him to step down and be like Nixon or Johnson, who stepped down in disgrace. They don't want that. So they don't want that going on his legacy. They definitely don't want to 25th him. And then, people will be able to showcase that Joe didn't get 81 million votes. So they don't want to open that can of worms either, because that's an investigation. They don't want that either. And the only other way out is death. Through natural causes, of course. I assume that Joe Biden is going to get deathly ill in the next few weeks, because that's really the only way that they can do this cleanly, is that Joe has to perish from this earth. I'm not calling for it. I think it'd be disastrous. But that's the only option that they have to be able to get whoever else they want on the ballots in certain states. Nevada is one. I believe Arizona is another. They've already passed that threshold. Joe's the guy. It's done. Can't move it unless he's 25th, removed by Congress. There's not enough votes in Congress for Democrats to do that, so the 25th is out. The only other way that they can replace him on the ballot, folks, is his untimely departure, or timely, depending on who you're asking, from the mortal plane. So until that happens, we're in the same boat. Nothing changes. If you think that, if you've been watching my content for the last few weeks here, it's been very consistent. Folks, I want you to understand, I support Trump 100%. I believe that Trump is the answer to get us back on track in this nation. And not just Trump, but the conservative values and populist values that the Trump campaign has brought forward, that have bubbled up, people running for the very first time, wanting to get involved for the very first time, because they realize morons, head moron of the Democrat Party, morons are running our nation. If that's the best we have to offer, folks, if Joe Biden is the best we have to offer, then people feel I can jump in the game and I can be a part of this. And that scares them more than anything else. They don't want fresh blood in this mix. They don't want you and I meddling around and finding out what they've been doing. That's why I've said for the last 2 years in particular that I don't believe that they'll ever let Trump be president. I support Trump. I want him to be president, but I don't think that they'll ever allow that to happen, primarily because they don't want to be investigated. I mean, just think about what we're witnessing right now. Joe Biden didn't turn over one day and suddenly was incoherent. It didn't happen on day one. We've seen the progression over the last 6-7 years. In particular, since 2019, when he announced that he was going to run against Trump, we've seen the decline. We made fun of it in 2020. When he was running for office, if you go back and you look at I know my Twitter account, I was using the hashtag Dementia Joe a lot in 2020. We knew then. So the cover-up of what they've been doing, and more importantly, folks, we're going to talk about the cover-up. They're going to talk about who's culpable and who should have done this and who should have done that. Here's what you have to keep in mind. That's secondary. I want to know who's making the decisions today. It ain't that man that was at that podium tonight. It's not the man that was at that podium with Donald Trump at the debate. There's a group of men and women that are running this nation that are unelected. They have no culpability to anybody, no accountability to anyone. That's what I want to know. And why aren't our Republican leaders demanding the exact same thing? Because it's a game to them, folks. They couldn't give two shits. I've said it for the longest time, if they wanted to fix the problems, they would. They don't want to. They would dig their heels in. I'm not doing this. You're not going to get another vote from me until this happens. They don't do that, folks. Because their conscience is about 1.5 inches thick when we need it to be miles deep. They just don't have it. So you're never going to get out of them what you want from them. Because the system that's in place right now has been in place for so long, the game's been played for so long this way, it's set up to be so corrupt that there's nothing that can fix it except for building it up from the ground up again. I don't expect that to ever happen. But they're going to have to change something, because what's going on right now in this nation is unsustainable. What we're witnessing right now is unsustainable. It doesn't get better until you get involved. It doesn't get better, and it doesn't change until you make your voice heard. Now, we've got an opportunity in November to make our voice heard. We've been talking about the too big to rig. Make so many votes that they... Folks, let me put it this way. It doesn't matter how big you rig it. If they're going to cheat, they're going to cheat. That's what's interesting about people, is that when you know what their goal is to keep Donald Trump out, they will do anything at all to maintain that power. They're not going to allow themselves to be investigated. They're not going to allow Donald Trump and Kash Patel and General Flynn and Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, their enemies. They're not going to allow their enemies access into their lives. They're not going to allow them to look into the crimes that they've committed over the last several years. We've still got 51 former intelligence agency officials that lied to us. We know that they lied to us. They said that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. Folks, the problem there isn't the 51. That's part of it. They should lose their jobs. They're still employed, some of them, with the CIA. They should lose their clearances, and they should be ridiculed and mocked for the liars and deceivers that they are. Congress hasn't done anything. Republicans haven't done anything. Do you think that they want anyone looking into what's been going on for the last just 3 years? Not even going back to 2016, not even going back to 2020 and COVID. Just the last 2 to 3 years. The bullshit, the criminality that has happened, and the cover-up, the culpability of these people. They're not going to allow Trump to look into that and investigate them and tear into their lives and do to them what they've been doing to him and others. Peter Navarro's one. Steve Bannon's one. It doesn't change. Nothing changes until you get involved. Now, your involvement this fall is to vote, but between now and then, you've got to be vocal, folks. Do you know the number one way to offset a bully or a Karen? The number one way is to give them back exactly what they're doing. Cry, claim to be the victim. I don't know why our heterosexuality is under such attack. What do the gay community have against? What's the trans community got against us heterosexuals? We don't have to blatantly show it every day. They've got to show it every day. We have to start becoming the victims. You see what I'm saying? We have to start playing the victim card just like they do. Because this is no different than what we're going through, folks, is no different than what happens on the playground, the school playground, where the bully threatens you. And if you don't back up and you stand your ground, the bully has to think for just a moment, am I willing to get my ass kicked? And if you're smaller and they've got 3 or 4 friends, they don't have a problem. Yeah, but you keep standing your ground and you give it back to them. And in fact, give it back to them intensely heavier than they're giving it to you. What'll happen? They back down. Well, that's what's happening right now. What's happening is that people are starting to push back and ridicule and mock. That's the first thing. You've got to have one person that says the king has no clothes, and then when everybody else realizes, hey, there's no harm to me saying the king has no clothes, that's what you get with what's happening with the Democrat Party right now. They're breaking apart from within inside. They're dismantling themselves. They're eating their own. That's why Trump has been silent. Not saying anything, not doing anything. Let them destroy themselves. Sun Tzu said in Art of War, when your enemy's destroying themselves, when your enemies are fighting each other, don't get in the middle of it. Let them do it. Let them knock each other out, make each other weaker. Well, that's what's happening right now. And what's funny is that the mainstream media has come out and said, well, Trump's being oddly silent. Well, why would he talk? When Joe Biden has proven time and time again that he can't.
Do you have a Cramersez.com free speech account? Unlike other platforms, Cramersez is 100% free speech. Get your free Cramersez account today at Cramersez.com.
Cause fuck censorship.
Impact Health Sharing isn't insurance. It's affordable health care.
Impact Health Sharing offers comprehensive medical services, covering preventive care, maternity, accidents, illnesses, and injuries.
Plus, choose any doctor or healthcare provider you trust with no in-network restrictions.
Enjoy the freedom and coverage you need
for your entire family.
To learn more about how you can save 30, 40, even up to 50% on your healthcare costs, call 844-827-2637.
That's 844-827-2637.
Cramersez is everywhere. Twitter, Truth, Instagram, and always on America's fastest growing free speech platform, Cramersez Social. Make your free account today at Cramersez.com.
Introducing Tusk.
With Tusk, you get uncensored news and secure browsing.
All while protecting your privacy.
Choose the news you trust and take control of your internet.
Join the free speech revolution with Tusk.
Download Tusk today at tuskbrowser.com.
Learn how you can save up to 70% on your healthcare costs with just one click. Visit Cramersez.com/impact for complete details. That's Cramersez.com/impact. The Cramersez Project is back.
With global news and local views.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
You're watching Cramersez.
Well, it's up to you guys. I keep saying the same thing over and over and over again, and I hope that you're listening and that what you're going to hear, the pundits are already talking about it. I'd love to go live. We should go do that. We'll see if we can do that after the next break. Is go live and see what they're saying. Wasn't it just 3 years ago when Joe Biden was in Delaware and forgot that he'd been at the hospital that morning? Wasn't that the Joe Biden that he'd just been to? He talked about he had to get to the doctor's office. Remember that speech that he gave in Delaware? Right after he announced. And then he said, "I'm not going crazy, folks." And he walked off the stage. We said then that there was cognitive issues because that's not normal. Anybody with half a brain can see that what Joe's been doing for the last several years isn't normal. And that's not to mention the fact that his earlobes disappeared. I mean, some people don't like to talk about that. They think that's conspiratorial, but I'd just like to know, where did Joe's earlobes go? Did he get plastic surgery? Okay, that's fine. But belay the conspiracy theorists when you don't answer the question, where did Joe's earlobes go? When they won't answer the basics, folks, when they won't tell you who's on the visitor log at the White House because of privacy issues, they're making up excuses no different than the mean girl or the bully on the playground. You can't play today. You can play in the playground today. It's rainy Tuesday, and on rainy Tuesdays you're not allowed to play. Those are the kind of arbitrary rules that we're seeing happen in real time. Because there's no policy. And everything is built on a lie. So things have to change on a regular basis. You don't have to do that with the truth. You don't have to stretch anything with the truth. There's no stretch. Nobody ever said, "Hey, stretch the truth a little bit there." Nope. There's no stretching the truth. The truth is the truth. It can't be stretched. It is what it is. And everything that we're watching, everything that we're seeing from these people is because what they've based everything on is a lie. And it began at the beginning, that Joe was fit to serve, that Joe had the capability of doing what the voters were voting for. You see, we've been calling for this for a long time, saying that Joe's not going to be the guy, by the way. There has to be somebody else. And Trump will not be allowed to be the president. So it means they've got to bring somebody else in that's going to put some energy into the Democrat Party, and then they can say, "Well, there was such an energetic, swing back because of what we've done that we took the race and we beat Donald Trump, and we'll never have to deal with Orange Man again ever." We've been saying that was going to happen for 2 years. This moment right now, if you go back and listen to my podcast from 2 years ago, you'll hear me say they're never going to finish it out. When I saw the Hunter Biden laptop, I knew it was over. That's when I knew the rules didn't apply anymore. When I had the opportunity to see what was on those hard drives, to see the imagery and the text and the crimes that had been committed, when I was able to see that, folks, what I was able to realize is we're fucked. Because the FBI had the same exact information. I cried. A grown man, because I realized that the trouble that we're in, that it's all for naught. It's so fucking corrupt all the way to the top. The FBI had the same information. They knew when those 51 former intelligence officials came out and said that Hunter Biden's laptop was fake, the FBI knew it was real and kept their mouth shut. Doesn't change, folks, until you get involved. They're afraid that you're not going to vote for them. That's their fear right now. They're not going to vote for Joe. And Democrats are worried that it's going to hurt their down ticket ballots or down ballot tickets. concerned that it's going to affect their livelihood. So now they're doing what people do on the playground. When the bully starts losing favor and people start pulling back and they start losing their minions, you start seeing little camps start to be created. That's what's happening right now inside the Democrat Party. And what they're doing, no different than the courtiers of kings and queens before, is everybody scurrying to find out what their new position is going to be, where they're going to fit in. Are they going to land on top with somebody who's going to be the victor, or are they going to stick down here with Joe Biden? Because Joe's on his way out. They're not going to allow him to stay there. Just like they won't let Trump be president, we're not going to have another 4 years of Joe. They won't try to push that lie on the American people. They won't try to say, well, those polls were all wrong. All the polls we saw, the lines of people, the rallies, Joe didn't have to show up. It was Jill at places. They had 40, 50 people. That shows you right there that Biden was the guy. Don't let your lying eyes fool you. Which is what they've done for the last 3 or 4 years. They've told us the 2024 election was secure and transparent, and now they expect us to believe that the next one is going to be as well. And if you question it, you're a problem. I think it's Whitmer that just made it illegal in the state of Michigan to go back in and check an election when you're checking it because you're alleging fraud. If it's fraud, you can't come get us. That's happening right now in real time. These are the things that are trying to do it to make it tougher. Folks, why would a governor make it tougher for you to go to make sure that who you think you voted for is who you really voted for? Why would they make it tougher to do that? Who does that benefit? Does that benefit you, the people? It does not. It only benefits those at the top. That's why I say you will not change anything unless you get involved. What I do for me. I don't do it for you. The stuff that I do behind the scenes, the working I'm doing all the time, what we're doing here at the Cramersez Project, all of these issues, folks, I'm doing for me and mine. I want you to join me. I want you to raise your voices the same way. But I'm not fighting for you. I'm fighting for me. And asking that you'll join. We'll be right back after this.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
Global news with local views.
From the halls of Congress
across the nation
and around the globe.
You're getting the latest news and conservative views.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
Global news with local views.
Cramersez returns after this message from our partners.
America's political prisoners need our help.
Cramersez is on a mission to raise $100,000 or more.
Can you help? Join our mission today
at Cramersez.shop.
Why pay more for your health care? Impact Health Sharing is a not-for-profit organization, meaning more savings for you. Most members save 30 to 50% on their healthcare costs compared to traditional insurance. Enjoy affordable healthcare without the high costs. Call 844-827-2637 to learn more about how you can save 30, 40, even up to 50% on your healthcare costs. Impact Health Sharing isn't insurance. It's affordable healthcare. Call now, 844-827-2637.
Learn how you can save up to 70% on your healthcare costs with just one click. Visit Cramersez.com/impact for complete details. That's Cramersez.com/impact.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
You're watching Cramersez.
One of the things that I'll get this right here eventually. One of the things that I've said time and time again over the last 2 years is that it's very unlikely, and Inked, I'm glad you brought it up. It's very unlikely that we'll have elections. And when I say that, I don't say that as a hyperbolic thing to say. You have to look at the situation as to where we are and what's happening in other nations that are a part of this global movement. Trudeau has done the exact same thing and held off elections. Zelensky in Ukraine just did the exact same thing, held off elections. So have we ever done it in the United States? No, we haven't. Could we? We'll see. Folks, everything is everything's on the table right now. So I've made some predictions over the last 2 years, and they're predictions. I don't have anything more than you have. I don't have a crystal ball. But what I have is a lot of insights into what's going on, but more importantly, what's gone on before, our history. And not just our history as America, but as humans, and what we've done, and what rulers and kings and kingdoms and empires, as they collapse, what they do, what they're willing to do, how they eat their own. Knowing that information is probably far more important. Knowing what's happened before and what was justified. Clayton Morris of Redacted had a series of great stories talking about the government agencies that are currently building detention centers throughout the country, one in every state, able to hold up to 15 million dissidents. That's what the paperwork says. It doesn't say we're going to hold detainees that are here illegally. We're not going to detain foreign invaders. They're for dissidents. And dissidents are you and I, those who dissent against the government. That's who these camps are being built for. FEMA's in charge of it. They've been doing it for the last several years. Obama started it. And we sit here and we're worried about Joe Biden and who's going to replace him. Folks, that was determined. It doesn't matter. Who replaces Joe does not matter. That's what you have to get through your head. That's already been taken care of. That scenario has already been lined out. Whether it was ChatGPT, AI that helped them get to this plan and figure out how to get all the places in the right, or a group of evil geniuses sit down and said, this is our goal. How do we get this to happen? And then every chance they get an opportunity to take a little bite out of that apple, they go in and take it. Because they're always looking for opportunity. So this thing with Joe Biden, folks, they're doing this. The people that want you to believe that, oh my God, Joe Biden has dementia? Really? Are the ones presenting the dementia patient to you. They're wanting you to believe that what they're offering up is they just have to. Sorry, guys. We didn't know that Joe's doing a lot worse than we thought. We knew 4 years ago. So this lie that they keep telling, this house of cards that they've built, has gotten to the point where the American population, many of us, don't think we're going to have an election. Because when you war game things out, well, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, and an election does not help you. What you need is something catastrophic. You need a black swan event. You need a nuclear attack on the U.S. You need several natural catastrophes to happen all at the same time. I mean, you need this huge 9/11 across the entire nation type of moment. And you see time and time again that we're ill prepared for when that happens. So we have one of these events. Let's say, just for shits and giggles, it's been war gamed out, that these young men that have been coming across our border aren't really here for jobs. Well, they are. They got one job, to guard us. That's what their new job is going to be. How likely do you think that they're going to be worried about your constitutional rights kicking down your door? You see, where they come from, they don't have constitutional rights. But what they've been told is they'll get 3 meals a day and a place to stay for them and theirs if they'll hold the boot against your neck. Is that a possibility? That's a possibility. That could happen. What's the likelihood of that? Well, based on what we've seen, it fits right in line. And it would almost fit the movie narrative that we've been going through for the last 4 or 5 years. You know as well as I do that what we've seen over the last 7 years is not normal in this nation. We've gone from the Obama presidency to where everything was pretty normal. I mean, I'd go back and take 2016 over again, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you like to live those 4 years that Trump was in the White House? Wouldn't you like to go back and relive 2016 to 2020? Wouldn't you like to do that knowing what you know now? Go back. And what changes would you make over that 4-year period? What would you do differently? Knowing what's going to happen, folks, it's knowing what's going to happen, but it's in so many different levels. And what I say by this is that it's not just one thing at one time. That's how they've been able to do the fraud. That's how they've been able to make people believe it's just one emergency after another. They've got this distraction over here. They got this distraction over here. We've got bread and circus everywhere as the entire thing crumbles down around us. All of it. And we're concerned about who's going to replace Joe. That's already been figured out. That's already been, you'll know when you need to know. But the people that are parading him out here, they're doing it for a reason. And the Biden family, it's because he's got a crackhead as his advisor, thinks that it's a good idea for Dad to go out there to showcase to the world just how Joe Biden is. It ain't the same guy. Regardless of whether you believe in the conspiracy theories of whether that's really Joe Biden, that man is a ghost of himself. My dad was doing a much better job prior to his death than Joe Biden is doing prior to his. What we're going to have to do as the American people is start rallying around truth. Don't allow the lie to be told. We have to rally around truth. That's what will stand the test of time. None of the lies they're telling, they're going to have all kinds of lies. I didn't know about Joe. I had limited access to Joe Biden on a daily basis. I only got to talk to him in conference calls, and I can hear it right now. One reason I can hear it is because that's the kind of stuff that I used to write. When I was doing emergency, crisis management, that's the kind of shit that I'd have to write. How do we spin it out of this and not block ourselves in? How do we say this and make people believe that? How do we do that? Well, they're doing a lot of that right now. And you're seeing the house of cards crumble in real time. And knowing what's happened before. By the way, you might think I'm meandering, but I'm not. I'm going to tie it all together here. Is that when you know what's happened before in history and what men and women were able to justify doing to other men and women so they could retain their power in the defense of whatever. We're going to save the empire. We're going to save democracy. Whatever it is, they will start doing illegal things, justifying them as right. We're already seeing that happen. We've got 1,400 plus men and women locked in jail right now because our government is afraid of them. Because they showed up on January 6th. Our government's afraid of a group of people that just wanted to make sure that democracy wasn't really in danger and that the election was exactly what the election was sold to us as being, as clear and transparent. They're sitting in jail. Oh, Kramer, they entered a building. They were there because they wanted answers. They didn't want to overthrow the government. They wanted the government to do their job. That's what happens when you show up. Scared the shit out of them. That's why those men and women are still in prison. They're being made examples of. And you're worried about who's going to replace Joe. Like I said, that decision was made a long time ago. This whole cycle of how they're doing this was all laid out. This isn't any haphazard thing. They're not just flying by the seat of their pants. They had to get Joe in with the lie that he got the most votes of anybody ever. And they've got to get him out without spoiling that legacy. Just imagine, he got 81 million votes, and then 4 years later, nobody wanted him there anymore. That doesn't quite sell in the history books. So they've got to give Joe an easy out. And there's only two available. They've either got to 25th him, not going to do that and ruin his legacy, or he dies. Like I said, the decision on what happens next has already been made. You and I ain't in that club. They're not going to tell us. until they tell us, oh, Joe got COVID. It was one of those MAGA extremists and wasn't wearing a mask around Joe and got him sick. Or they'll stage it that it's an extreme MAGA that assassinates Joe. They'll make it public. And then they can do all kinds of shit. The nation would turn overnight. Nobody would support Trump. See, this has all been wargamed. It's not like it's coming off the top of my head. We've been talking about this for 2 years. All the scenarios and why, and the justification that they would use, the language that would be used to sell it. We're all in this together, folks. All in it together. We'll be right back after this.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
Global news with local views.
From the halls of Congress
Across the nation.
and around the globe.
You're getting the latest news and conservative views.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
Global news with local views.
Cramersez returns after this message from our partners.
America's political prisoners need our help.
Cramersez is on a mission to raise $100,000 or more.
Can you help? Join our mission today
At Cramersez.shop.
Why pay more for your health care? Impact Health Sharing is a not-for-profit organization, meaning more savings for you. Most members save 30 to 50% on their healthcare costs compared to traditional insurance. Enjoy affordable healthcare without the high costs. Call 844-827-2637 to learn more about how you can save 30, 40, even up to 50% on your healthcare costs. Impact Health Sharing isn't insurance. It's affordable healthcare. Call now, 844-827-2637.
Learn how you can save up to 70% on your healthcare costs with just one click. Visit Cramersez.com/impact for complete details. That's Cramersez.com/impact.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
You're watching Cramersez.
So, there you have it. We just had a big boy press conference. First one in U.S. history. Big boy press conference. Got an 80-year-old man up there having a big boy press conference. Why? Because he had to prove he had the capability of doing it, and he didn't do it. He failed again. Might as well shit his pants on stage. What do you think that tells the rest of the world? You see, of all the scenarios that we put forward and we offer and say, this is a potential, there's the one thing that we can't count on, and it's what we don't know someone else is already going to do. As Rumsfeld said, the unknown unknowns. You don't know what you don't know. And knowing that, nothing is set in stone. But I can guarantee you that they will utilize every emergency in their power to take more of your rights if you allow them to do that. If they bully you into believing that you don't have a voice, that your vote doesn't count. Folks, your vote counts only if you use it, if you cherish it, if you value it. Because if you really valued your vote, you wouldn't allow them to do with our elections what they've been doing. But like most things, what we expect is we expect that somebody else is going to do their job right and we don't have to watch them. That we don't have to keep an eye on the watchers. We do. Just like I don't trust my bank either any more than my bank trusts me. That's why we go back and forth. I take money out. They say, you took this much out? Yep, I took that much out. Thank you. Here, I want to put this much in. Okay, you put this much in. Thank you. Getting receipts. And that's what we have to do on a daily basis, is bring those receipts. Bring those receipts to the feet of the people that need to be held accountable and say, today is the day. You do that by raising your voice, and it starts locally. It's not going to happen in D.C. It's not going to happen even maybe in your state capital. It happens at home. It starts with your school board and your city council, holding those people's feet to the fire. been saying it for a long time. There's a group of people in this nation that they want revolution so bad. I don't want revolution. I see it on the horizon, but I don't want it because it doesn't benefit anyone except those who make money from revolutions and wars and yada, yada, yada. The same old. It's the cycle over and over and over again. These people at the top are always sucking it back out. Well, what they've done is they've sucked out so much, there's nothing left to suck. And the peasants are now saying, hey, wait a minute. We're not cool down here. You're taking half of what I'm making and giving 100% to that person that's not working over there at all. That doesn't last very long. And the way that you fight that, folks, is you start airing your grievances, like Seinfeld, what was his name? Costanza's dad did. You air your grievances. You're very vocal. You raise your voice. When something's not, I'll give you an example. I don't agree with it. I understand it. Don't agree with it. The dudes that are cornering the pedophiles in the stores, they trap them online. These men and a couple of women so far come forward and I'll meet you over at the Winn-Dixie, sweetheart. I'll bring a box of condoms and some vino. And they show up and they're being ridiculed and mocked in the store on camera and slapped around, assaulted, because they're tired of it. Citizens that are doing this. I've seen so far as Florida and Alabama, I think, is where the two have come out of. But they beat the shit out of the guys in the stores, slapping them in the face, ridiculing them, mocking them, telling everybody this person here is here to meet a 14-year-old boy. This dude here is here to meet a 13-year-old girl. Very loud, very vocal. They're using their First Amendment rights to say what's going on in our nation is not fucking normal. What we witnessed tonight is not normal. It's part of the play, though. And what you have to understand, what your role is. You don't have to accept it as normal. You got to start holding the people in your immediate neighborhood accountable for what's happening in D.C. What I mean by that is why haven't you contacted your state legislatures? Asking them, why aren't they doing their job and protecting you from this overreach of government? We bitch and we moan and we complain about what's happening, but rarely do we take action to make anything, well, change. I call it the wifey thing. My wife loves to talk to me about what's going on. I hate the details. Could not care less. Does not matter to me. But she just wants somebody to listen to her. And when she has a problem, she doesn't want the solution either. I'm a solutions guy. That's what I do. It has been a tumultuous 35 years. The not wanting to hear the bad news and just wanting to talk about it phase is over, folks. Bitching and moaning, screaming at the TV, it has to be over. Because our nation, you can see what's happening. Our nation is on its knees. Right now, today. Joe Biden put us there. More importantly, the people, the puppet masters behind Joe Biden put us there. The perpetrators on the left and the right that have known about this for 4 or 5 years, they put us there. And if you think that they're going to allow any of this to be made public, of who did what, who knew what when it started, what threats were made, who was goaded, what was leveraged, we finally learn what we've been through over the last 7-8 years. It's going to disgust. It's going to disgust a lot of people. But you don't have to wait 7 or 8 years or 30 or 40 years to find out what the truth is. All you have to do is look around and see what's happening right now today. What they're doing right now this moment. The lies that they're telling you right now this moment. Who was that idiot on MSNBC? What's his name? I can never remember his name. The former congressman. Mary D'Amica. I can't remember his name. He was telling us to shut the fuck up and listen to him. He wanted to be serious with us. This was the best Joe Biden ever. That was in February. In February. This is the best Joe Biden ever. That's what the shills were selling us on TV. Shut your mouth. Don't believe your eyes. Believe what we tell you. We're here to program you. We'll tell you what to believe and what to think. And if you say anything, we'll call you out as MAGA or extremists or potential threats to democracy if you question what we say. Folks, as I've been saying for the longest time, it's no different than the threats of the bully on the playground. I'll call you a name and everybody believes me. I was the mean girl in high school. Things haven't changed. I still do the same shit. Now I just do it on TV. If you don't shut the bully down, they won't do it to themselves. They will not shut themselves down. They will not stop doing what they're doing. They will not stop doing what they've been doing. I've said it once, I'll say it a million times. If they wanted to, they would. Yeah, my dad told me that when I was a kid. If they wanted to, they would. If they wanted to fix that fence, they would. Dad, why don't they fix that? If they wanted to, they would. He doesn't know how profound that was for me. It made me understand humans. They can be a big talk. That's why the black community right now is abandoning not Joe Biden. They're abandoning the Democrat Party because they've realized how they've been played over and over and over and over again with big promises. We'll do this for your community. We'll do this. We'll enact this. We'll make this legislation. We'll take from him to give to you. And they realize it's all a lie. Look at Black Lives Matter. Right after the election, go back and look at what happened. Black Lives Matter went in and made some demands in the Joe Biden White House because they'd gotten him elected. And then he told them to basically fuck off. That was right there in the first 6 weeks. Ouch. That's got to sting. Now, is Joe Biden a racist? I don't know. From all appearances, probably. His era, the people he hung around with, gave a eulogy for a Ku Klux Klan guy, Bird. So, I don't know. All I can judge by is the way he talks. And he was using that N-word pretty freely back there in the late 70s, early 80s. In Congress, reading it out loud. Didn't have a problem. Thought he was justified in saying it. I know times change and people, change. We've all changed. But I'm sorry. Just stop saying a word doesn't mean that you've changed in your heart. And what we've seen from the Democrat Party is they haven't changed from the 1860s. They've still got the slave mentality. And instead of wanting to enslave just black people, instead of trying to fight a war over that, they're willing to fight a war over being able to enslave all of us. This liberal ideology and this wokeism, that there's a million genders, whatever they say is possible. Folks, it's straight out of 1984. If you haven't read those books, if you haven't read the classics, what dystopian futures look like based on overreach of government, you need to go back and look at them. You need to go read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. Who is John Galt? We're there, folks. We're there. Our nation is at its feet. I'm saying this today because we're not at the point where everything is bad. But we can see it from where we're standing. If you just project a little bit forward, and let's just say for shits and giggles, that Trump is allowed to be president. I don't think it'll ever happen. But Trump is allowed to be president. What do you think the landscape is going to look like in this nation as far as crime and everything else? They're going to do on steroids to this nation what we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years. The crime that we've seen in these cities, San Francisco and LA and Portland and Chicago, and the murders and the homicides, the rapes, The illegals doing what they're doing. You think that's going to get any better? No, they don't care. Trump will shut down the border, but then they'll go to their NGOs and say, okay, now release the hounds inside the country. Because if you want complete control, you have to have chaos. Chaos is what brings change. You can't have change without chaos. You're happy in your home. You don't have any desire to move. Hurricane, tornado comes along, you got to change. Chaos. Otherwise, you weren't going to change. Same way in a nation. Look at the chaos that we've had since 9/11. We've either been at war, recession, some emergency every 2 years, just clicking along like this, destroying industry after business after business after business. Remember cash for clunkers? Remember that debacle? Well, that destroyed the car industry in this nation. I used to make a lot of money from cars. A lot of money. Me personally, just from voicing commercials, I made $200,000 a year. Voice commercials all over the country for car dealers. Don't do it anymore. The business is gone, folks. You know the backbone of American might was our car industry and our ability to build, engineer. It's all gone. We don't have any of that anymore. We can see tomorrow right around the corner. If you close your eyes and just imagine for a moment where we're at right now, if they allow Trump to go back in, like I said, for shits and giggles, it's still going to be another 4 years of mayhem until they get back around to what they wanted to do in the first place. They're not going to waste that time. So they're going to have to jam through somebody. They're going to have to jam through Gavin Newsom or Whitmer or somebody out of the blue. And they'll make it radical enough. And they'll promise enough things. And then whether it's true or not, the election will showcase that they won. Whether it's rigged or not, that's what'll happen. They'll say that we won and you can't prove it. And if you try, you're a threat to democracy. You're a threat to the system. How do I know? Because they've already done it once before. We've been down this road before. And if you expect me to believe that the motherfuckers that lied to me in 2020 won't do it again in 2024 and then tell me to shut my pie hole, or as the bully would say on the playground, yeah, I fucked your mom. What you gonna do about it? Because that's exactly what they're doing. It's the same fucking language, folks. The same mentality, the same strategy, the same tactics. And the best way to stop them is to stop them. That's the best way. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not playing your games. You see, we do have one thing in our back pocket that we rarely use, and people don't know how to use it, but it can be used really effectively if we just said, you know what, we're going on a holiday. We're going to all go in and change our tax basis so that on our payroll that we're going to take out as much as we can. We're going to pay the least amount to the government as possible. It's a soft response, but one that they would feel immediately. You see, they rely on you for everything, folks. The government doesn't produce shit. Government's never shown up and said, hey, listen, we had all this extra stuff laying around. Any extra stuff they had to take from somebody else, and that somebody else is you and I. It will not stop. They will not stop. The machine will not stop. You can see right now that there's a few cogs at the top of the machine that's kind of, and they're starting to, we got a problem up here. It doesn't affect the bottom of the machine. Bottom of the machine is still doing what it's supposed to be doing. They want you to be distracted by bullshit arguments about what's going on, right? Joe's replacement has already been picked. That person knows exactly who they are, and they've already been going around the globe telling everybody that they're the new guy. There's no reason for the governor of California to be in China and in India and all these other places around the world, meeting with world leaders, meeting with manufacturers. Yeah. You want to bring something and manufacture it in my state of California? Knock yourself out. Come on. But Gavin's not meeting with them. He's not meeting with the people that are going to benefit his state. He's meeting with international leaders. So like I said, they've already chosen who it's going to be. And then when asked, oh, no, I'm behind Joe, man. I stand with this guy right here. He's the guy. Joe can carry us across the line. Oh, You're going to remove Joe and I'm the new guy? Well, then of course. Yeah, I'd be honored. You see, that's how they play that shit off. We've got another 4 months of what we currently have as the Constitution. As I've said time and time again, I don't think that they'll allow Trump to be president. Not that I don't want it. Some people go, oh, you're saying not to go vote for Trump because they won't allow it to happen. That's not what I'm saying, you dumbass. If that's what you heard, you were listening to respond as opposed to listening to comprehend. Because that's not what I said. What I've said time and time again is, I support Trump. If there's an election, I will vote for Trump. I don't think that will matter. I think that the same people who rigged it in 2020 will rig it again in 2024 in any number of ways. And that's what I'm laying out right now. Do I want Trump to be president? Yes. It doesn't change anything. That's what I think everybody thinks. It's not going to be like that. We're back. No, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to see this nation torn apart. They've already told us what they're willing to do. They've already said that Jamie Raskin is already putting together a deal that in the event that Donald Trump is allowed to be president, that they won't verify the vote. You go to Congress on January 6th, and they're supposed to do all of that work that all those guys got in trouble for. They're just saying they're not going to do it. They're going to hold Trump on trial potentially for inciting an insurrection, and that Congress has the authority to hold him responsible for that. And so they would impeach him before he ever became president. That's what they're talking about. And then if you got the crazies out there, what have they said on the extreme? Why hasn't Biden already released SEAL Team 6 to go after Trump? That's where their hearts are, folks. That's where their minds are. That's what they want for our nation. And it doesn't get any better. It doesn't get any better until you start being very vocal about everything. I'm not telling you to go into the stores and beat up pedophiles and videotape it and put it online. But if you do, make sure that your camera work is spot on. We want to see the actual action. We don't want this shit off screen anymore, right? Okay? Start shooting for the masses. But as you go out and you start to air your grievances, and you start to tell people not only what you're upset about, but what you're not going to allow in your life anymore. When you start telling the bully, I ain't doing that. I'm not going to do what you're asking me to do. I'm not going to do what you're telling me to do. You can't scare me. You can't. Okay, well then do your worst. You're going to lock me up? Lock me up. Now we got a problem. Because that's what it's coming to. Because that's all they have left. All they have left is the boot on your neck. Right now, the boot on your neck is yours. It's your inaction. If you would just raise your voice, just a little bit, the boot will come off because it's you. You're doing that to you. You're holding yourself back. The moment you decide that you don't want to be a slave anymore is the moment that you're a free person. Nobody made you do anything. Nobody told you had to do anything. Well, I would have lost my job if I hadn't taken that vax. I lost an entire company. Yep. So don't talk to me about sacrifice. Don't sit there and tell me that, well, somebody else has got to... plenty of people have already given their lives to this fight. Because what we're going through right now, folks, this is the most sinister war that you have ever seen. It's been being waged for the last 8 years. This isn't something that just came up in the last 2 or 3 years, or they've been at this for at least the last 12 years. The last 12 years, there's been a force in this nation getting us to this point, moving us to this point. To the point where talking about girls and boys and what are they, and can you be a cat or a furry, or that is a serious debate on news shows where they're having to talk about this. It tells you exactly what they wanted to do and how successful they've been at doing it. 12 years. 12 years. Which is an entire generation of kids, because the entire thing started in schools at the same time. We started hearing the same language at the exact same time, 12 years ago. And now that we're starting to see the effects of it, because it's come home to roost, our kids are now telling us, or our grandkids are telling us, well, you don't understand, Papa. You don't understand. And that's when I introduced them to a series of books that outline who people are. I show them history books. You see what we're going through right here? It happened in Rome in this period of time. What happened over here, that was happening in Greece. Oh, the Spaniards did that, or the Portuguese did that, or the Dutch did that, or the British did that. We're at the end of what we're at the end of the beginning. I guess the best way to put this. I'm gonna wrap it up with this. We have 4 months to know what's going to happen with our nation. I've laid out exactly what I think it's going to be. I don't think Trump's going to be allowed to be president. So that lines us that we've got more leftism, more of the crony government, and I don't think that's going to sit well with a number of people. I think that you're going to see a number of people decide that they're going to check out and not play in the system anymore because they've realized how rigged it is, and that's going to cause a problem for the system. And they're going to have to start locking up the dissidents. Those like myself and others that won't shut their fucking pie holes. The ones that the bullies can't shut up. They're going to have to start taking care of those people as well. 4 months. 4 months is how long we have. Right now, Steve Bannon's in prison. Peter Navarro's in prison. 1,400 other Americans are sitting in jail right now for raising their voice. In America. Well, I don't want to raise my voice. They can't lock us all up, folks. That's the whole thing. They can't lock us all up. What you've got to understand is, like I said, this game, this war that is being perpetrated against us, it's gain, loss, counter move, pivot, feint. Moving around, they're trying to find the weakness. They're taking the advantages that we offer them. And your silence at a rigged election in 2024, your silence and sitting back and say, well, you know what? I guess they were right. Cramer was right. They did exactly what he said he's going to do. Wow, I didn't see that one coming. You have to start drawing your red lines about what you will accept and what you will not accept in this nation. And what it's worth to you. And how much your vote and democracy and our republic matters. What you're willing to do for it. I didn't serve, but I'm willing to at any point. Hopefully you are the same. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
Global news with local views.
From the halls of Congress
Across the nation.
and around the globe.
You're getting the latest news and conservative views.
You're watching the Cramersez Project.
Global news with local views.
Cramersez returns after this message from our partners. Learn how you can save up to 70% on your healthcare costs with just one click. Visit Cramersez.com/impact for complete details. That's Cramersez.com/impact.
What is Impact Health Sharing?
Impact Health Sharing isn't insurance.
It's a modern, affordable alternative to traditional health insurance, offering significant cost savings.
Most members save 30 to 50% on healthcare costs. With Impact Health Sharing, you enjoy the freedom to choose any doctor without in-network restrictions.
With an easy, hassle-free enrollment process.
Plus, access telemedicine 24/7 with $0 provider fees.
Call 844-827-2637 to learn how you can save 30, 40, even up to 50% on your healthcare costs.
The Cramersez Project is back.
With global news and local views.
You're watching The Cramersez